This is going to be a more kind of raw, unfiltered video with minimal editing where I just kind of talk about a breakup that I went through recently. And the reason that I want to do this is I want to kind of have a video that I wish I kind of had when I was in this relationship, when I was kind of going through a lot of stuff and dealing with the problems I faced. And if anyone else is in the same situation, hopefully they can find someone who they relate to. So just for some brief context, I'm going to try and keep personal details of the relationship as out of the video as possible. And I do want to emphasize, me and my ex-partner ended on very good terms. We have nothing but love and respect for each other. But I learned quite a bit from this relationship, and I think I grew a lot as a person. And the lessons I learned, I kind of really wanted to share them with the world. So the first big kind of lesson that I wanted to talk about, I have some notes up on the side here, is love isn't enough. And this is the name of an audiobook by Mark Manson. And this audiobook actually helped me a lot with making the decision to end things. Because it helped me realize that, love isn't enough. And so what do I mean by love isn't enough? Basically, what I realized is he talks about this in the book, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase that and how I applied it to my own life. But there's two things. There's chemistry and compatibility. These are the two things that kind of make people fall in love or be in a relationship, right? Chemistry is when you have very, very high amounts of physical kind of attraction. It's that feeling that you get when you're around someone, and it's very unexplainable. Like you'll just be attracted to someone, and you can't quite explain why. Chemistry is really important. But the other side of things is compatibility, and compatibility is kind of the more boring stuff, right? So do you guys have common interests? Do you guys have, similar hobbies? Do you guys have similar lifestyles? Do you guys like to talk in the same way? Stuff like that, right? Are you both very planned, or are you both very spontaneous? Stuff like that. So the compatibility and chemistry thing, a lot of people will be very compatible with each other, but there'll be no chemistry, right? You'll meet someone who you get along with super well. They're on on paper, they're a great fit. You love hanging out with them, everything like that. But there's none of that romantic kind of spark that you need there. And these relationships where there's high compatibility but very low chemistry are just very boring and plain, right? But on the other hand, relationships where there's extremely high chemistry, like you guys feel it intensely, but there's low compatibility, are very kind of turmoil filled and very up and down. And this is kind of the exact place I found myself in, was there's very, very high chemistry, but low compatibility. And online, I think a lot of the advice and stuff I see about relationships is really flawed. There's lots of stuff on opposites attract, and stuff like that. And the reality is like, no, opposites don't really attract. And the thing is I guess the hard part for me was understanding okay, what is a difference that's a deal breaker, and then what is a difference that's okay to tolerate? Because obviously you're not going to find someone that's identical to you. And the way that you can kind of recognize this is you can kind of look at core values versus surface level differences. So having a different taste in music might not be a deal breaker for most people, but if your whole life revolves around music and it's a core value to you, music is all you do. Maybe you're a producer, you're in a band or something like that, and the person that you're dating doesn't listen to much music or doesn't really care about it at all. For some musicians, this can be a deal breaker, right? That can actually be a big thing, that they won't be with someone who's not also into music, because that's their favorite thing to talk about. And if they're with someone who can't talk about it with them all the time, they're going to feel very unsatisfied. But for most people, that's not going to be a big thing. So what's a deal breaker and what's not a deal breaker primarily comes down to you and what's important to you. And that's a big thing I had to realize is, for me, things that are deal breakers are things that are not going to be deal breakers for other people. And that's okay. Other people don't have to understand why you make your decisions. And other people will not understand what it's like to be you. So you have to be comfortable with this is a deal breaker. So for me, a big deal breaker I realize is someone who is very spontaneous, because I have a very planned, rigid, ordered life. I realize that's a big deal breaker for me. And I have to be okay with that, because things like planning, things like consistency and order and organization are very important to me. And for a lot of people, that's actually a turnoff. That's something they don't like. But for me, that's really important. So that's kind of an example of kind of what defines compatibility. Compatibility is like what's up to it's up to you. What are things that you really want in a partner? What are things that are important to you? What are things that you don't want to sacrifice on? That's kind of what you need to keep in mind. And so the problem with a lot of people, and the problem with me actually is that I didn't know what my desires were. Like, what did I actually want out of a relationship? What were the things that I needed? And so this kind of this kind of came down to like low self-esteem, right? So I had very, very low self-esteem, and I used kind of romantic partners, friendships, all of this stuff to avoid kind of feeling how I felt. And I needed the external validation of other people in order to feel good. I hated being alone. And so when you hate being alone, you're going to try and keep people around you as much as possible. So how do you keep people around you as much as possible? It's by, catering to their wants, their desires, their needs. So all I did for a lot of my life was just cater to the desires of other people around me. And this made me a very well-liked person. I had an insanely diverse group of friends, people that were very different from each other. I could just like meld myself into being the way they wanted me to be. However, this came at a pretty big cost. When you're someone who has very low self-esteem and relies on, what other people think of you in order to feel good, because you're constantly just trying to keep people around you and make them happy so that they don't leave, you're constantly focusing on other people's desires instead of your own. And I realized because for so long, I had just focused on what other people wanted, I had no idea what I wanted. So when it came to getting into a relationship, I wasn't even good at knowing if I was compatible or not with someone because I had no idea what I wanted, and that's like a big problem with a lot of people. A lot of people in these chemistry relationships that have no compatibility are just people who aren't actually attuned to what is compatible for them. Some of this can be through a lack of experience from just not dating enough. But a lot of it just comes down to you just want someone there really badly. And when you find someone who you love and you have these feelings for, who has them for you back, it's like you need it in your life. So you'll put up with a lot of different stuff. And because it's your default, you're used to just putting up with stuff and catering to the desires and whims of other people in order to feel validated, seen, heard, all that kind of stuff. So that was a big thing. I had to realize what were my desires, what were my wants. I had to really actively focus on, not people pleasing and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a big thing. Learning what I actually wanted to do in the first place so that I could do that. Another big thing was I realized I had a very deep savior complex. And again, this kind of ties into the whole people pleasing thing. I realized I derived a lot of my significance from helping or saving other people. So oftentimes I think a lot of guys can kind of fall into this trap, but I've seen a lot of girls do it too. If you keep finding yourselves if you keep finding yourself in relationships where you're trying to save the other person, you're trying to make sure that they're always okay, you're the one who's constantly there for them, and you're you essentially just try to make the other person happy all the time and take personal responsibility for their emotions. I realize I do that all the time, and it's you derive a couple of different things. So for me, I derived a sense of meaning, right? I would feel a lot of meaning from that. It would feel good to help out and stuff like that. And it would feel very meaningful, and it would give me kind of a sense of purpose. The other big thing that it would do is it'd make me feel very significant or important, right? I would feel I matter because I'm helping this person out. And I would base my sense of self-worth on how helpful I was to other people. And again, the reason I did this subconsciously was kind of because my worth is dependent on what other people think of me. So if I'm very helpful to other people, and if I'm perceived as very helpful by other people, then I'm worth a lot, right? So this people pleasing and the savior mentality very weaved into each other and fed off of each other. And yeah, so that was two big things. Is it gave me a feeling of significance, of importance, and it gave me the sense of meaning, my life had a purpose to it, kind of, and also lots of validation. I realized I didn't this is kind of hard to admit, but I didn't really unconditionally give a lot of the time. Whenever I gave very excessively or to a certain point, I would expect that people would do it in return. And I realized a lot of the unconditional giving I had in my life, it would be in relationships where I wasn't trying to like get anything out of the other person. But in like a lot of relationships where I was very unsatisfied, I think that this was kind of the core issue, was like if I was very unsatisfied in the relationship, instead of just leaving that relationship because I wanted to keep people around, I was afraid of cutting people out, I was afraid of being alone and stuff like that, I would just like aggressively people please and be super nice, and then hope that like me being nicer and me being better would get the other person to change and start meeting my needs. Because it's like, if I'm trying really hard to meet your needs and to make you a happier, better, healthier person, then you will start meeting my needs better. But whereas the reality is like people sometimes won't meet your needs because they're just not the kind of person that they're going to be able to be, right? It's no flaw in the other person's character if they can't meet your needs, but that's just kind of how it is. Another big thing that I had to work through was that relationships would not solve all of my problems. I think for a super long time, I had this fantasy in my head of like, if I just get a relationship, I will be happy. I will find fulfillment. I'll find satisfaction, all of this kind of stuff. And I would desperately crave a relationship, right? And I think now that I've been through a relationship, I realize like, relationships are stressful. Like relationships do not solve problems necessarily. They might solve a few, but like you add so many problems to your life too with the relationship. It's like you can't like move now very easily because it's like you have to keep this other person in mind. You can't make any plans for the future without keeping this person in mind. You have to like financially, it's like super expensive to have a relationship. Like my weekly costs like almost half after I'm out of a relationship, and not that I'm complaining about any of these things. I think it's kind of wonderful and it's nice to be able to spend on a person and to give so much to a person. It feels awesome. But these are very real like things that come with it. And I think that idea in my head that I had of a relationship was like someone would come in and I would just be happy forever. And I think realizing that I wouldn't be happy forever. Like there would be huge problems, there'd be disagreements, there'd be like lots of hardships that come with the relationship. I wasn't prepared for that. And the second thing too is because I had this idea in my head of like a relationship will make me happy, everything will be good. When I actually got into a relationship and I realized I wasn't happier, I entered this like very depressed state. Because everything I'd done up until that point had kind of been to get into a relationship. Like I was like, oh, let me get a high paying job because then I'll be able to more easily get into a relationship. Let me do this, let me do that, let me improve my looks, let me go to the gym, let me eat healthier, let me be more productive. Everything was geared around like getting into a relationship. And when I finally got into one, I was like, oh, I'm still sad. Like I still don't really feel that good. And that was a huge learning moment for me, is like relationships will not fix anything. And I think you have to go through that. Like you can't just intellectually know that relationships won't solve your problems. You have to experience what it's like being in a bad relationship, or like a relationship that is, not good for you specifically, in order to realize like how it does not solve your problems and it can create more problems and stuff like that. So what I'm doing now to kind of improve and to get better is I've really started focusing on just having goals that are important to me. And I think a big part of this was going through this relationship. I think before, every time I've tried to like have goals that are important to me or whatever like that, it does not work. Like deep down, I'm still doing it just so I can get into a relationship. But I think now I am at a point where like I actually have goals and desires that are very important to me. And a lot of it came to like connecting to like what my innermost desires were. It's like asking myself, like, if I was going to be single for the rest of my life, what would I do? What would I enjoy seeing? And what would I enjoy doing? And I'm actually at a point now where like, I'm kind of happy to be single. Like I do like the freedom of it. I like the ability to just explore and understand myself better because, for years, I really didn't know much about myself. I didn't know what I liked, what I wanted to do. I wasn't comfortable with myself, and I would just judge myself all the time and be super harsh and mean. And for the first time in my life, I'm, just waking up every day and being grateful to be who I am. I'm grateful for the friends I have, for my family. I'm grateful for kind of just being able to do stuff that I enjoy doing. I found hobbies and interests that like actually cater to what I like to do. And it's been a lot of fun. I've gotten super into cars out of nowhere, and that's been a lot of fun. And it's helping me build up like cool financial goals because I'm like, oh, I want to buy this car, I want to do this thing with this car, and stuff like that. So it's given me motivation to work. I've also gotten a lot more into YouTube and content creation and stuff like that, joined lots of cool communities online. Um, and yeah, I feel like overall, I'm just finding myself and figuring out what I want to do and getting in touch with these core desires, understanding who I am and who I want to be and where I want to go has been an amazing kind of journey. And I started to feel a lot better. I definitely started this journey a while ago while I was in the relationship and everything like that. But coming out of it, I feel like all the lessons that I learned are like truly solidifying. So I guess that's kind of it. Those are the lessons I learned. So to recap, love isn't enough. You need more than just a feeling. You need compatibility. You need to understand what your desires are, what your wants are, and like the reason you need to love yourself before you get in a relationship is because like if you don't know what you want and if you don't accept yourself for who you are, how are you going to pick a good partner? If there's parts of you that you repress, that you deny, you're obviously not going to be able to find a good partner. It kind of, I guess, kind of stupid example of this is like Mr. Garrison from South Park. If anyone knows, I've been watching a lot of South Park lately, but if anyone knows him, he like denies that he's gay, and like because he hates himself for being gay, he denies that he's gay. So like if you think about that, like he doesn't love himself for who he is, and so he denies aspects of him that are very real, and he runs away from them. And so like obviously he can't find a good partner. If you're gay and you deny you're gay, how are you going to find a good partner? But that's like an extreme example, but a lot of that stuff is true. Like for other stuff too, like when you deny certain parts about yourself, you deny how you feel about certain things, it's going to be very hard for you to find other people who actually align with you if you hate parts of yourself and you deny those parts being there. So yeah, compatibility, love yourself. Love is not enough. And I think, yeah, people pleasing, thinking a relationship is going to solve your problems. It does not. Relationships actually just add problems to your life, and that's okay. Those problems are pretty awesome a lot of the time. I was happy I had those problems. So yeah, those are the things I've learned. And to the person I broke up with, if she is watching this right now, I'm still super grateful for all the times I had, the lessons I learned, and I have nothing but love. So I hope this helps someone out there who might be going through a breakup. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.